And the Baby Reindeer thing is a classic example, because I didn't like the story. I didn't think it suited Alone Again. I said no, because I'm very protective of the song. I want to allow it to be used for comical purposes. But he wrote me a personal letter and said, in his letter, he said how much the song had meant to him when he was younger. It meant everything to him. And he was desperate to have it included in the series. So what could I do?
Well, Gilbert O'Sullivan, you've notched up 58 years as a singer-songwriter. 1967, I think, is that date when it really began.
Yeah, that was the first record. I came up to London to break into the business. And you had to be in London to do that. You couldn't be in a district or a suburban area outside. So yeah, I came up, first record company, I approached CBS, liked my songs, but hated how I looked, because I created this image, this pudding basin haircut, which is now the height of fashion. But in 67, long hair was here to stay. The James Taylor look was the key. And Gilbert O'Sullivan came out with a cap and boots, Charlie Chaplin jacket, pudding basin haircut, looked like a freak. So I left CBS, hassled them to let me go, because they tend to sign you up and keep you forever. So I managed to get out of that. Then another record company appeared, liked the songs, hated the image. But the song I had for the second record company was called I Wish I Could Cry, which was written as a result of Robert Kennedy's death, because we all thought Robert Kennedy would become the next president. So, and they ruined that. So that meant that I thought I need management. And so the best manager at that time for solo artists was Gordon Mills, who managed Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. So I knew I didn't want to look like them. So I didn't want to wear a tuxedo and all that. So I sent the small demo tape that I had with 4 songs, and I sent pictures. Now, when he saw the pictures and his secretary gave it to him, he just threw it in the bin, because, I mean, it's ridiculous. Charlie Chaplin dress geek. And he didn't really listen to anything. But by the afternoon, his secretary said that he was kind of curious, and he said, get me that tape out of the bin. And being an ex-songwriter himself, because he co-wrote It's Not Unusual, so he understands music and stuff. So he listened, and he liked the songs. So that led to him, in the end, managing me, and me going to his home to meet him. Because when I met him for the first time, going to his, like a Hollywood home, never seen anything like it. He needed to know that I had more songs than the 4 that I sent on the tape. But once he was convinced about that, then he signed me up, and the rest is history, because he pretty much took over. Hated the image, didn't like the image.
But you were steadfast in that image, though, weren't you, Gilbert? You were not going to budge it for a second.
No question. I'm proud of that. When I look back on it now, because my hair was so short then, when you see pictures of me now and you look at those old pictures, they look very look pretty contemporary, because everybody's got haircuts, pudding basin haircuts. They've all got them now.
Looking back over your early life, born in Ireland, of course, and you're among that rarefied group that hailed from Ireland, but then obviously achieved worldwide fame. Van Morrison, for instance, you think a little later on Bono. So it's kind of like that rarefied atmosphere. But then I think you were 7 when the family upped and moved to England.
Yeah, my dad was a butcher and in Ireland, and all my musical background stems from growing up in Swindon in England and stuff. That's where it all kind of started. The Irish influence, the Bonos and the Thin Lizzies and Van Morrisons, they kind of started musically in Ireland. But I didn't do that. In Ireland, leaving at 7, my musical background stemmed from growing up in Swindon. I'm proud of the Irish roots, though. I'm kind of proud of that. And we certainly have a special reaction when we perform in Ireland.
And very sadly, your dad passed away when you were only 12. And you said in an interview that you wished you knew him a little better.
The little I know of my dad, there was no musical element in my family. I'm one of 6 children, so I was the only one that was musically inclined. There's nothing I can relate to with my dad, but I know he a bit of a gambler. He liked his dogs. Stuff. I'd go into the race course, because when he was in the army, they backed onto a race course, so he kind of picked that up from there. Yes. So I kind of like to think that had he been around for my success, he probably what he would have loved would have been a horse.
And a winning horse too, no doubt. As a teen, your mum allowed you to have a piano, and it was in the garden shed. I guess that's kind of where you went and I guess really got the feel for playing piano.
Working class families in the 50s and stuff, if not before, certainly early 60s, there was always a piano in the house. They didn't have that much money, but there was a piano. Why? The piano was there because a parent would say that if one of their children could learn to play the piano, they could earn a few bob in the pub at night on the weekend and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I had piano lessons, but I didn't enjoy them. And I got found out when the piano teacher put up the piece for me to play, and I played a different piece, which meant that I didn't know what I was reading. So she figured out, she told my mother that you're wasting your money sending him to piano lessons. So I would, tickling on the ivories, I'd be playing around, beginning to write the odd little song in the house with my other brothers and sisters and everyone. So the garden shed was there. So Mum allowed me to have the piano in the garden shed, where on the weekend and in the evenings after coming back from college, I could sit out there and play. Much not to the annoyance of the neighbors, which is incredible because we lived in a terraced house, 3-bedroom terraced house, people right next door either side. They never complained. On a weekend when the men would be out digging their garden, planting their potatoes, this idiot would be singing Masters of War by Bob Dylan in the garden shed. And they never complained. So I have great respect for them for putting up with me.
It was the great Rick Davies, of course, later of Supertramp fame, who really kind of honed your skills on the piano and also as a drummer.
Because once the Beatles came out, we all wanted to be in a band. So we identified with them. They could write songs without reading music and stuff. We thought, well, if they could do it, maybe we could do it. So I was one of thousands who started a band. My first band was a school band called the Doodles. The second band was a youth club band called the Prefects. Yes. And then I was getting really good at drums, and I was beginning to write the odd song. And then Rick is just a fantastic musician, and he was finishing his term at art school, and I was just starting mine. So that's how we met up. So he kind of taught me blues piano and stuff, and he introduced me to artists which influenced me, Chuck Berry original stuff. And we had a band called Rick's Blues, and we were really good. I was the drummer, I was writing the songs. And when we came to London to do a demo, we did 2 of my songs. So that was beginning to happen. We could have actually turned professional, but the bass player and the guitarist were on apprenticeships, so they didn't want to risk turning professional. So that meant that Rick and I, who wanted a music career, had to decide what to do. Now, Rick couldn't be a solo artist. He had to be in a band. So he joined a band called The Lonely Ones, which became a band called The Joint, which ended up Supertramp.
And I know that the great Bob Dylan and the Beatles certainly were an inspiration for you in terms of songwriting and style. What exactly was it, Gilbert, that so inspired you?
For songwriting, you couldn't have had better examples than Lennon and McCartney and stuff. And the fact that they didn't read, we felt that, well, maybe they could do it. And we're able to write because it's a love of music that enables us to write. It goes in one ear, hearing it, and it comes out the other ear, hopefully with a new song. And the thing about Dylan is that he was, from terms of songwriting, it wasn't "I love you, baby, you love me," which is okay. It was about events going on in the world. As I say, Masters of War. I mean, he really hit on those. So that element came into play. But also vocally, I don't have a great voice, but I have a distinctive voice. So I identify with Dylan on that element because he doesn't have a great voice. So I always felt that, well, if he can get away with his voice, I could get away with mine. And then with the writing. So the combination of those two really worked to develop my career.
1970, so we'll spill forward to your first big hit. And Gilbert, when I think about poignant music, it doesn't get much better than Nothing Rhymed. What do you think looking back on that song now when you hear it? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm proud of the song. I mean, interestingly enough, that wasn't a song that Gordon Mills heard when I went to see him because I hadn't written it. That was written after he had signed me up and stuff. So it illustrates my lyrical approach, Craig, because I tend to write about, if it's a love song, if there's a middle section, I might go off on a tangent and talk about something else. And then I bring it back to the verse on the subject matter of the verse. I like that aspect of lyric writing and stuff. So Nothing Rhymed, what was going on in the world for the first time ever on television in Biafra, starving children. We'd never seen that before. It was just horrendous. And so that kind of leaked into my lyrics. And so I do it in a kind of subtle way, just incorporate it in a small way. I don't want to preach to anybody, God forbid. But so that's part of my lyrical process. It's a bit like a newspaper. Verse 1 can be, page 1 can be about one subject. Page 2 could be about something else. I like that aspect of lyric writing. The common denominator will be the hook line at the end, like on Nothing Rhymed. But I'm able to kind of get into other areas lyrically. So that's a very important song for me.
And also songwriting is very important for you, and you treat it like the job that it deserves to be treated as, with full focus. You start at 9 o'clock and you work and you finish at 5 o'clock, and it is treated with that kind of discipline.
Yeah, well, you need that discipline to. I think it's the Brill Building. The Brill Building was a building in New York owned by a publisher called Don Kirshner. And he had all these rooms with a piano in it and stuff. And people like Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield, Neil Diamond, they would go in at 9 o'clock, clock in, and sit there all day to come up with songs, which he then, as the publisher, would try to sell to get people to cover. So that mentality, that's driven me always to sit there, to be disciplined, because I feel that a 9 to 5 is not boring. It's a very enjoyable process. And the good thing is that if after a few days, Craig, you're not getting anything melodically, so that you haven't wasted your time, because you've been playing and you're practicing, your fingers are getting more nimble. So there's always a good side to the bad side, and I'm not coming up with something. But the process is brilliant, because despite all the technology that we have today, the process for me, songwriting is just a piano, albeit in those days it was a cheap one, which developed into a position where I now have a grand piano. And the process is I use cassettes to write songs. I don't like digital devices, because you have to put your glasses on to look at the bloody things. And so cassettes, I put the cassette player up, 70s ghetto blaster with inbuilt microphones, cassette in, and I'm off. So yeah, so that 9 to 5 thing, people might think, well, that must be boring to do it like that, but not for me.
And so for you, songwriting, you've got this floor upstairs at your home in Jersey, and not even the housekeeper's allowed in there. Is that right?
No, OCD. I'm very OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Can't get away. I'm happy on that frame of mind.
Yeah.
I have to straighten the carpets out in the hallway every day. My wife is okay with that. My daughter's a bit concerned at times, but but my music room, Craig, if you saw it, it looks chaotic, but it's everything. I know where everything is, and if the housekeeper went in and moved anything, I'd be epileptic.
Of course. That's called organized chaos, and only you know how that works in your particular environment. You hear, Gilbert, of songwriters penning, let's say, a mega hit in 2 minutes on the back of a napkin. Has that ever happened to you, where something has just come so suddenly, almost like a bolt from the blue, you literally can come up with something in a very short space of time?
I only did that once with a song which has not been recorded. Well, actually, the demo we made at Rick's Blues, when I was leaving Rick's rehearsal room, which was above his mother's hairdressing shop, I walked home to where I lived, and this melody came into my head. It ended up being a song called Not This Time, But Maybe the Next. And it's the second song on the demo that we did in London. So that's the only one. I mean, when I hear people say they've written it in 2 minutes, really tell me about it, please. Songwriting is a great craft. It's not that simple. When I hear people who've written hundreds of songs, say, yeah, please tell me about it. I mean, it's a craft, but it's the magic. I mean, Paul McCartney's Yesterday is a classic example of him coming up in that melody in the middle of the night and stuff. And he played that melody to loads of people under the guise of fried eggs or whatever it was and stuff. But so it kind of happened, but that's the only time with me.
Alone Again, naturally, is such an evergreen song. What inspired you to come up with that particular song?
The great thing about writing at that time was I was allowed to give up my job as a postal clerk, earning £10 a week. Gordon Mills put me into a bungalow he owned, gave me £10 a week, and I could write all day. Mm-hmm. So it was during a period of that, about 1971, when I was writing what had to be. In those days, you didn't go in to make an album and do 12 songs over 3-4 weeks or 4 months or 2 years. You had 3-hour sessions where you would do 2 songs, an A side and a B side. And then you would have several 3-hour sessions. You'd have an album. So we needed a new single at this time. And the 2 songs I was writing was Alone Again and Out of the Question. Mm. And I was happy with both. The thing about the lyric of Alone Again is, of course, people are surprised, maybe you too, Craig, that it wasn't based on to some element of but I think it's an understanding of the subject. That's what makes lyric writing interesting, fascinating, is that you get into the characters that you're writing about without having to experience the situation. It's that joy of lyric writing which allows you to get into these subjects. So Alone Again was very much about that, me putting myself in the place where somebody stood up at the church, attempting suicide, and then a parent or a relative dying close to you and stuff. All those are serious subjects. but I do it on an understanding basis. We went to the studio that evening with the finished 2 songs, and everybody said, oh, out of the question, that's got to be the single. It's the most commercial. And then by the end of the evening, when we finished, after a beautiful guitar solo by Big Jim Sullivan, who played, wonderful guitar player, played that lovely solo in Alone Again. My manager, Gordon Mills, said, it may not be the most commercial, but it's a better song, so we'll go with that. Took a while to break those, about 6 weeks before the radio latched onto it and stuff. So after that, the rest is kind of history.
It's kind of like catching lightning in a bottle, isn't it? You just don't know which songs are going to do the distance and beyond, and which are going to be kind of like a flash in the pan, and then they just evaporate forever.
Well, God forbid you did know it, because then every time you write the bloody song after that, you'd be saying, the last one I thought would be a hit, so I must think the next one. No, don't get in that area. Just be happy with your song. Look upon that as success. And then leave what determines a hit when it goes out there into the public. I think there's a great danger in allowing yourself to think, have I written a hit? You've written, we hope, a good song. That's the key factor, I think.
And while we're talking about Alone Again, naturally, I note that it was used in Baby Reindeer, of course, which last year was an absolute phenomenon all around the world.
When the request came in to use it, I said no. I didn't like the story. I didn't think it suited Alone Again. I'm very protective of the song. I want to allow it to be used for comical purposes. And if it was serious, it has to be something I would agree. I said no. I didn't like the subject matter. I said not to no to it. But he wrote me a personal letter and said, in his letter, he said how much the song had meant to him when he was younger. It meant everything to him. And he was desperate to have it included in the series.
And Ted Lasso, Alone Again, naturally makes an appearance there too.
That's the beauty of those sync licenses that you're happy with. They do introduce you to a brand new audience. And the Baby Reindeer thing is a classic example, because that was such a successful series, and the amount of people who heard that song and wanted to know who it was and who it was by, it worked out really well. I mean, these syncs come in, and many of them I turned down. We turned down a washing machine ad in America for $250,000 and stuff, because it's just not, I protect that song. God forbid I allow a song like Alone Again to be used in some stupid commercial. So I'm very protective on that, and it's worked out really well that we don't allow it to just freely be used.
You've been referencing Gordon Mills, and another great song is Clair, of course. And then that was Gordon Mills's 3-year-old daughter, Clair, that you'd been babysitting, and that gorgeous kind of laugh at the end is actually Clair.
And it's Gordon Mills playing the harmonica in the solo. And it's his wife, if you listen at the end of the record, it's his wife frying in the background.
Oh, is that right?
She used to cook meals for me. So I used to go up to the house from the bungalow. I would go up, they would ring me up and say, Ray, we got a big do tonight. Could you babysit? Yeah, I would go up and babysit for them. And Claire, affection, I have a lot of affection for Claire, because it was, she'd be walking in, Uncle Ray, and I'm going to marry you, Uncle Ray, when I get older. And she was the one babysitting who would get up in the middle of the night and stuff. So yeah, so that was interesting enough, Craig. I couldn't write that song today, which is
you couldn't, I know, because times have changed and it would be viewed in a completely different way. But I guess that was the innocence of those times. But you see, I listen to that with innocent ears. I don't see anything other than the fact that it is a beautiful song. And then when you look at why, you're showing great appreciation for this 3-year-old girl you were babysitting and the joyousness of her.
And not only that, the feeling I get when I perform it is there, because I really like the song, and the reaction from the crowd, because they usually sing along, in particular on the end of the verses and stuff. The whole theater will erupt with people singing. I know how much it means to people.
Yes.
And I'm proud of that fact, that the song has such an effect.
Oh, of course. And you were talking about the fact, of course, Gordon Mills and his wife would refer to you as Ray. Well, that was your birth name. So how did Ray become Gilbert? Was that an homage to Gilbert and Sullivan, I wonder?
No, Craig, the Gilbert came about because of the character, the image I created. Coming to London as an artist, I call myself just Gilbert, like a just William character. The Chaplin jacket and the cap and boots, and hobnail boots.
Oh, Wakka Doo. And again, I wondered, how did that come into your mind?
I think it's a kind of inspiration for me. Also, music hall. I have CDs of kind of early 20th century music hall, strong melodies, crazy lyrics and stuff. So that was a kind of influence on that. I see it as a kind of music hall type song. It's just fun to do. I like to think there's humor in my lyrics as well as the serious side. So humor is a good thing. I'm a great Spike Milligan fan.
Yeah.
How to play with words. So I kind of like to play with words and introduce elements. And Wakka Doo was a way of just incorporating that kind of musical tribute. Bill Haley and the Comets, they did us, because we used to think, well, nobody else has done a new Wakka Doo Wakka Day. And there's Bill Haley and the Comets have a track where they go, ooh, Wakka Doo, Wakka Doo, Wakka Doo. So I'm not the only one who's done that.
In the 90s, you recorded, I got to say, a stunning duet with an absolute legend. The song is Can't Think Straight. And of course, that legend, the late, great Peggy Lee. How did you get her? I'm sure a lot of people are thinking that was really quite the coup.
At the time when I wrote I Can't Think Straight, that would have been the first time I thought about a duet. Now, but I didn't want to pick a contemporary artist of my generation to sing it with. I liked a lot of female singers who were young and like myself. But one of my favorite songs of all time is The Folks Who Live on the Hill, sung by Peggy. And I had all her albums because she would interpret great songs. I look upon Sinatra as the best interpreter of a male interpreter of song. And I look upon Peggy, like Ella Fitzgerald, as the best interpreters of song. And when you learn your craft, Craig, as a songwriter, you have to listen to the great songs. That's your learning process and stuff. So the thing with Peggy, so I thought, well, could I approach, would she be interested? So we did approach her and she asked for us to send the song. So we sent it to her. She called back and said, yeah, she liked it, loved to do it. We flew to New York, Hit Factory in New York, and we arranged it. We picked her up. The surprising, slightly alarming thing was that she arrived in a wheelchair and had to have an oxygen tank with her too. And so we're a bit nervous about that. But we got through the vocal, no problem at all. I found it difficult to say, could you do that again, Peggy, please?
Yes.
I wasn't sure I wanted to say that to her. So that was something kind of special there. And we talked for hours about music. I told her how much I loved her albums, particularly, for example, 2 albums she did called Latin Alalee and Ole Alalee, where she was photographed on the cover with 2 matadors. My album, not the last album, the one before, but the one before that was Latin Alalee. And we reproduced the cover with 2 female lady matadors on my side. You should check that out. It's a really good album. Very Latin. We went to Spain to record it, so it retains a whole kind of Latin feel. Very proud of that.
And writing is really what you do. And then you kind of look at a map of the world and to think of how many places you are that are you're incredibly popular. Japan, for instance, and you played the Troubadour not that long ago in Los Angeles. That must have been a huge thrill.
Yeah, it was really because it's such an iconic venue and stuff. And so to do that there, because the likes of James Taylor, Carole King, have all performed there and stuff. So it was great to go back there. The reaction, we had a fantastic reaction. So that was really nice. First time ever, because it suited the way Bill and I performed together in that kind of a small venue. So we had a really good time. Other places we played in America, because I haven't toured in America much. I've only been doing that now for the last 4 years. Prior to that, it would have been early 70s. I was never that much of a tourer. I'm not like a 52 weeks a year touring person. I'll make the album important to promote it, and I look forward to getting out there to do a reasonable amount of dates. And when we go to Japan, it's interesting, Craig, because they love to hear English lyrics, even because they kind of learn English from the lyrics, people like myself. So I find that interesting. And so visiting these places are short-term promotion, because I'm more fond of being at home writing than I am about being on the road for a long time.
Of course. Now, little birdie tells me there's some new music on the way. You're working on another album.
Well, I've been writing the songs for the next album, so I've completed them. So we'll start a new album around June, July time and stuff, and that will come out early 2026.
Now, just before we say goodbye, because you've been very kind and generous with your time, just 2 things. You don't drive, is that right? You're not somebody that drives a car, and
my dad didn't drive, so maybe that's what I picked up from my dad. So I'm a good walk. I don't have a mobile phone, Craig. I'm totally computer illiterate. I have a purpose-built recording studio with a 48-track digital and all that stuff, big library, but I don't write up there. I write in my music room in the main room of the house, locked away upstairs.
All right. So that's why your fabulous daughter, Tara, got you all set up for this interview, didn't she? Because I suppose you could. I suppose you could be deemed a Luddite, and I
She
mean
has,
that with great affection. And the other thing, I guess, the takeaway, looking over your life, don't let it ever be said that being married to a famous pop star won't work, because you and your wife have been married. I think it's what, 45 years. Two fabulous daughters.
it's a good family life. I'm very happy, because I'm really down to earth. I'm not a red carpet person, so I'm pretty much a stay-at-home type. Although my wife is not always happy that I'm staying home all the time, but she has her best friends and they meet up for lunch and for dinner. And in the early days, they used to say to her, who's your husband? Are you not married? And of course, I was the one at home while she would have odd social activity going on. So I'm not that kind of person, but luckily she's been very good for me. She allows me to concentrate on the music, doesn't interfere, takes care of the house, takes care of the home. So it's a really good, purposeful relationship. I'm very happy.
Thank you so much for your time and for those wonderful stories. And also, might I say, for decades of magnificent music. 20 albums so far, and I'm really thrilled to hear there's another on the way.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.
Now, if you like that interview with Gilbert O'Sullivan, and I got to say, what a charmer and so many fascinating stories, well, you know what to do. There's a button down there. It's called subscribe. You hit it. It's very simple. And then when the next celebrity drops, you'll be notified. And I look forward to seeing you next time with another Celebrity Drop.